Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another Sales Hacker webinar. Assuming you've been to one of these before, if this is your first one, hello. We are welcome. We are lucky to have you, and welcome. This is going to be a really fun one. These ones are always super enjoyable, where I literally just get to hang out with a friend of mine and talk shop. I am joined by TJ Mackey, who is the SVP of Strategy over at our friends Saper Consulting. TJ, welcome, brother.
Glad to be here. Like you said, these are the best ones. You can hang out, talk about the goodness of work.
Totally. It's always fun. It's almost like a live catch up, and then we get to weave in the topic. It's cool. So this is an interesting one, and we were actually talking a little bit beforehand about this, and this topic has like a visceral response from people, and what we're talking about is myth busting, go persona based versus personalized sales campaigns.
That's right.
And of course, there's been this big movement. We went like too heavy on the automation side, and then we swung so heavy on like 100% personalized. If you're not personalizing, you're a joke. And there's no happy medium here, and people have such strong reactions to this. So I'm super excited. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions, a lot of people with opinions on this one. So I'm excited to tackle it. Now, before we get into it, and we do have a deck we're going to share. We got some meaty content we're going to run through. But before we get there, super quick housekeeping. So number one, these are always recorded. So if you have to jump off, you got to do your thing. You got to close a deal, hopefully, whatever it is. Please go do that. We'll send this out within about 24 hours. And then secondarily, super fun for me and TJ to catch up, talk shop, but it is even more fun when we know who we're hanging out with. So please go to the chat function, put your name, your title, company you work for, maybe an interesting fact about yourself. I don't know. Let's make it fun. And then there is also a chat feature. So a Q&A feature separate from the chat where you can ask us your questions, right? This is, like I said, a very topic everyone's talking about. So get on there and ask us your questions. I'll be kind of manning the Q&A, weaving them in here and there. And then we might do something fun at the end. We'll actually invite maybe 2 or 3 up live, and you can actually ask your question in front of the whole Sales Hacker community. Hopefully we have time for that. But put all the questions in the Q&A. We'll select a few and ask if you want to come up to the stage. But TJ, without further ado, man, let's dive into it. And we start, as always, it's always interesting to hear the story behind the person. So my favorite question to ask is, for the community, what is TJ Mackey's superhero origin story? How did you get to be SVP of Strategy? First off, cool title. And second, a very cool, fast-growing company. How'd this all happen?
Yeah, this is my favorite part of the segment when you do this with folks. So I hope I can, contribute to that greatness. I think that my story best starts with the fact that I was a small kid from a small town. I talk about this, when I'm reminiscing with my friends, on where we all came from, how we got to where we are. I did not grow up in the Bay and around fast-growing companies. And, in my community, sports was everything. And so I, unfortunately, was not great at sports. And, so it was hard to find my spot, as this small kid, trying to find my place. And, in my community in particular, preachers and, reverends and the such were kind of the pillars of the community and the folks that were most respected and gone to for advice and counsel. And I saw this as a kid, and I was like, well, I can't throw a football, but, maybe I can preach some good news. And so I went on this journey of early on in life, studying to be a preacher and sharing the good word. And I actually went to college for it. And right out of college, I helped start a church. And And it was a whole journey. And, along the way, I realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do, that I liked starting new things, and actually, creating companies was the thing I was more passionate about. And so set off on a new path. And, over the years following that, I started some companies, a coffee shop, an eye mask company, a little tech app. None of them really took off, but it was a great way for me to learn about the world of business. And I was definitely taken with it. And, after a few years, I found Sapper. I was fortunate enough to find them while they were small. I was team member number 6, and I was a glorified SDR when I came on. And it was at the moment I joined Sappers when I realized that my history and background wasn't for waste. Because, when I was, learning to be this preacher, and I was looking at these members of the community that were well known and had this positive influence, their job was this really simple thing. It was to tell simple stories in new ways to help people learn how to solve their problems. And when I started prospecting and working on behalf of these different companies, I realized that that's what sales is. My job as a salesperson is to tell a simple story in a new way to help somebody else find a way to solve their everyday problems. And so this moment of connection really clicked, and it helped me put some years of practice and very different work to use when it came to things like copywriting. I used to prepare a lot of talks and speeches, and that's, an email is nothing if not a small sermon. So this was a connective tissue moment for me, and really opened the doors. And since then, we have grown Sapper rapidly. I was fortunate enough to help, create that SDR team and our sales development efforts on behalf of our clients, grow it to a very large team, and haven't looked back since. I think we'll talk more about it, but that's how I got here.
I love it, man. I love it. I've been lucky enough to hear that story before, but every time it's like, it says so much about you, and I love this kind of conclusion that it comes to, because if as sellers and marketers, if we can just remember this, tell simple stories in new ways that help people learn how to solve their problems. If we just remembered that and had that ingrained in our brains every day, that is essentially our job. All this complexity that we layer on top of it, is necessary, of course, but we bring it all back to this, and it's so cool that your story kind of brought you there. I gotta ask one thing. What was before joining Sapper? So you had this little journey into all these different tech companies, startups. I've been there too. What was like the craziest hat you wore at one of those companies? What was one time you're like, what's going on? What are we doing?
All right, I'll tell you one, and if we got time, I'll tell you another. So one was a coffee shop. So I started a coffee shop in Seattle. It's a competitive market. And we decided we were going to
import. Home of Starbucks, dude.
I know, right? I was like, move over. And we decided we were going to buy our own beans from Central America, import them ourselves, and roast them to have this competitive edge. So we took a coffee buying trip down to Honduras and spent a week with a guy we met on the internet, driving through the countryside. And at one point, we kind of dramatically, this convoy of trucks that we would travel with, pull into this large parking lot, urban area. They take us into a warehouse. A group of men with large guns come out of nowhere and say, stay in the warehouse, we're being followed. And so we end up hiding out in this warehouse for an hour and a half. Apparently there were some renegades loose in the community, and they heard people were traveling. And so here I am in Honduras on this coffee buying trip going, what on earth have I gotten myself into?
Wow. That's crazy. They just heard you guys had the best beans, man.
That was it. See, that's what I do in product market fit.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. That's cool. And, those stories certainly shape our career. All right. I want to quickly go to the community shout out. Leslie, thank you for joining us. Native, Montanan. That's awesome. Wayne Cerulu, Eric Crowell. Got Maxine in the house.
Hey, team.
Michael Von Brendel. His interesting fact is that he's never been to prison. That's good. I'm happy for you, man.
I like that.
Krista, Karain. Okay, we got a lot of people. Jacqueline Nicholson, hello, welcome. All right, man. Well, let's dive into it. And sometimes it's helpful to frame up, where we're kind of pulling this information from, and some of these conclusions that we'll draw, and some of these tips and tricks that we'll talk about. Where's this kind of coming from, other than your personal experience and story?
Yeah. So, the background is, I mentioned joining the team early at Sapper, growing this team to be a team that services hundreds of clients. And, the job was to, onboard our clients, learn about their businesses, and create outbound prospecting campaigns for them. And so, I personally onboarded the first 100 clients that we had, and, oversaw many hundreds after that, and was responsible for creating and editing and approving thousands of sales campaigns. So I've done this a couple times. I don't say that to brag. I just say that, like, I've seen it, I've done the work, and I'm grateful for the experience. And not just, there's always, of course, a lot of different. I've done sales campaigns for companies that sell doors. I've done it for companies that are selling insurance, Fortune 100, and like 100 of my friends in a basement. Like both sets, we've created campaigns for them. So we've got some experience to share with the team here.
I love it, man. Couldn't be a better person to talk through this. But let's start with, what's the problem? What's broken in the industry that we need to fix and move forward from?
Yeah. The problem is that prospecting's hard. And I know that everybody on this call, if they're in the world of prospecting, whether they're managing or doing, or they're in a relative field, they know the feeling. People love to know the facts, and the data answers it. 43% of companies miss their annual revenue targets, 57% of AEs miss their quota on any given month, 52% of SDRs, and 40% of companies report a decrease in effectiveness in outbound for the last 5 years. And I can say, somebody in the space doing this, as a profession, that like it's definitely changed, and the process is not nearly as easy to do as it was 5 years ago, and definitely before that. And 61% of sales teams say that getting enough meetings is their biggest hurdle. If I had enough opportunities, my pipeline would be great. And I think that's never been more true than the last 6 months. I know a lot of people I talk to saw a lot of COVID stalling happening and having to create new pipeline. Thankfully, people are reporting that things are picking up again, but there's a big urgency right now with many companies I talk to that they need more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems from the outside, from the buyer side, that outbound, everyone kind of has looked to outbound through COVID as like the answer. Like, I'm definitely getting more prospecting emails than ever before. When you look at your client roster, have they upped the ante, upped the volume? Because I know I'm getting probably 30% more emails than I have before, like pre-COVID.
Yeah, and that's, there's a lot of data to support that. HubSpot put out a great report, talking about something like 38% increase in sales emails and a decrease in reply rates and effectiveness. There's a lot of people talking about how calling is becoming more effective. I think it depends a lot on your audience and who you can get accurate numbers for. But suffice to say, a lot of people are looking into outbound because, when times are tough, folks are doing less inbound looking. Referrals are going to trickle in less consistently. They got to be convinced to spend money, and they're probably not going to become knocking on doors. So you've got to go out there and knock on theirs. Yeah,
for sure. And before we kind of move forward into framing up this and then going into some solutions, I find it super helpful if we do a quick poll to help us kind of speak to the different levels that we have. Always curious to see what role you are in. Are you kind of an individual contributor, sales, BDR? Are you an account executive, sales ops, frontline sales manager, sales leadership? Always helps us frame up the conversation and speak to a few different personas, if you will.
It's great spread.
Yeah. All right. We'll give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Perfect. So makes sense with this topic. We got 41% coming from business development. We got BDRs like, hey, this is hard. I need some answers. 17% account executive. I find this really interesting. I know at Outreach and a lot of companies I've talked to, through COVID, everyone seems to have said, account executives, you've got to go out there and start doing outbound.
Yep.
And they weren't beforehand, which is crazy to me. But I think that like more and more are saying, hey, that's part of your job description now.
Yeah.
And then 5% sales ops, 5% sales enablement, 5% frontline sales managers, pretty heavy, 17% on the sales leadership, which is awesome. And then 5% marketing and demand gen, trying to support their BDRs, I assume. And we got a sales engagement manager. That's a cool title. You hear that title a lot, TJ? That's a cool
I run into
title.
very few sales engagement specific managers, but I love to see that.
That's a cool. I think that will become more prevalent for sure. I'm seeing more like sales copywriters these days, which is interesting. And sales engagement manager. It's the future. It's crazy.
Sales engagement, baby.
All right. So that's a big problem. And what's kind of leading to all this? Why is prospecting harder than ever before, other than, just COVID?
Yeah, I've got strong feelings on this. I feel like I end up talking about this a lot. One of the things about Sapper that I'm really proud of is the fact that we work across a lot of industries. So we're not just like SaaS. Like SaaS is great, nothing wrong with it, but like there's a lot of other types of companies that are doing prospecting too, and they're less informed on the technology curve of what's going on in the world, why it's getting harder. And so it comes back to like people are more distracted. Like we're all, just to your point, people are getting more emails. They're getting more texts, they're getting more calls, they're getting more cold FaceTime requests. And it's all of the channels are very, very busy. And then on top of that, like people have lives and kids that are starting school amid COVID. Like it's crazy time. People are distracted. There's more barriers to connections. Like something that I say all the time is today is the easiest day you will have to prospect, because tomorrow's going to be harder and the next day is going to be harder than that. Like you have like all of Google and Outlook's top internet email service providers trying to keep your sales emails out of somebody's inbox. And, you've got all of the, phone connection people trying to figure out how to keep cold calls from going through to people who don't want them. Like the cards are stacked against you. Billions of dollars are invested in keeping salespeople away from others. And so, you've got barriers to connection. And the last piece is just buyers are changing their preferences. It used to be you had to wait for a salesperson to call you to inform you what your options were. And now, of course, it's the age of internet research and buying committees, and buyers are coming to you when they're 80% of the way through the process and they've got their top 2 or 3 picks. So doing the work and forcing their hand with a motion like outbound, it makes it more challenging. People aren't going to naturally step into it.
Yeah, dude, I absolutely love that as a piece of truth, and also just motivation to keep in mind. It's kind of like almost depressing motivation, but it works. Yeah. Today is the easiest day to prospect. It is just going to get harder and harder and harder as we go. I just saw, I think my phone now has an option where if it's like unknown, it just automatically screens it.
Right.
Automatically, if it's not in my contacts, like I don't even see it. Yep. which is crazy, and stuff like that's going to keep happening with email and all this. So keep that top of mind. Yeah, make it happen. Well, it's not easy, but it's easier than it will be.
It's going to just get harder. So we all have to elevate our game, which is a big part. And I think, not to lead the horse here, but that's why everybody's wondering, like, what's the answer? What do I do?
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that we were talking about before we kicked off, but it's this idea of amidst the age of the internet persona and the fact that there's more coaches and advice and value giving online than ever before, like opinions on this have polarized. And like even coming into this session, I knew that, there's probably going to be some friends sending me some angry tweets after this, which is okay. Like, it's all right. But like people have strong opinions. Like I know the truth is that in order to beat this challenge of prospecting, I have to personalize every single touch and email with 100% custom messaging, or the opposite. Like, no, you're a fool. I need to send 1,000 messages and use completely persona-based approach. And this dilemma between these two arguments is making it hard for people to know what the truth is and what to do.
Yeah, For sure. I think if you're ever on the fence of thinking something's 100% true, you're almost always got it wrong. Everything's a shade of gray, man. Everything's a shade of gray. And this is no different, but I agree. The polarizing opinions on this are crazy. And the interesting thing is as soon as we shift over to one side, you might be right on that opinion for a short period of time, but then everyone else is going to follow you, and then it's no longer going to work. And that's an interesting thing about what we call best practices is as soon as they're best practices, by nature, that means they've been adopted by everyone, which means you're probably too late, which is something interesting about the whole concept. But
the moving target of like a competitive edge versus table stakes. I know few industries where it moves faster than in sales development, sales engagement. It's just like lightning fast. And I think adopting this mindset of like the gray, and I don't mean that in the sense of it's a cop out, like there is no truth. That's not the case. But we don't live in a world of fixed positions. It's all about contextual relevance, and it's all about knowing our audience and knowing what we're selling and knowing about execution when it comes to our teams. It doesn't mean that you can't find the path ahead or you can't figure out what your silver bullet is, but it means that you probably can't buy it from Walmart. It needs to be a little more handcrafted than that. So just to for all the folks here that are kind of wondering where I'm going to drop the hammer on yay personalization, nay personas, vice versa. Spoiler alert, that's not what's going to happen. I am going to make an argument for how to get to balance.
Yeah. Can you quickly on this one, because I love this idea of contextual relevance, just to hammer this home, can you give an example of what you mean when you say contextual relevance? What would be a good example?
Yeah. So, I mean, contextual relevance is all about making this specific to what exactly I'm doing. So we're going to talk about this a lot. We're going to unpack it. But for me, this is why the idea of knowing your buyer is so important. So I don't know, if I sell tool belts to dishwasher repairmen, I need to know things about them. Like if they're out in the field, they're probably not going to answer my email. If they're under a dishwasher somewhere, and I'm sending them 800 emails, they're probably not going to answer. But at the same time, maybe they also won't answer their phone unless it's 8 a.m. because they're, again, out in the field. So, that's an off the cuff example, but this idea of contextual relevance means that our tactics need to be influenced by our buyer. We don't need to show up with tactics and say, buyer, you better respond to what I have.
I like that way of thinking. Yeah. All right, let's move it along. Cool.
So this is something I want to give, and I want people to walk away. I believe in this. We're going to talk about things that maybe in a year or two will no longer be the case. Again, it's a moving target. This I believe in. The purpose of sales campaigns are to create doubt about how I do work today that are enough that I'll listen to the idea of a new way. I'm going to create enough doubt about how I do work that I'll listen to a new way. Everything else is tactics.
Yeah.
I'm telling simple stories to help people realize that there's a better way to do things. That same idea. I think it's super important. So let's talk about how to do it. The spectrum of reward. So this is what it all comes back to in this conversation of personalization. It comes back to this idea of what am I getting rewarded for and what is diminishing returns. So, there's people that are advocating or arguing for this idea of high touch, fully manual custom prospecting, which there is a time and a place for. And there's folks doing the low touch, fully automated, audience-based prospecting, which is diminishing, but there's a time and a place for. And so this idea of spectrum reward is where are you going to find the greatest give back for the actions that you're taking?
Yeah. Here's a great question. It's a good one, and it's a tough one. I'm going to interject and hit you with it if you're up for it. All right, Jonathan, great question, man. Thanks for joining us. This is a good question. Can TJ expand on creating doubt in a Google world? How to create doubt that gets them chasing a reward beyond their ability to Google the topic themselves. So reading between the lines, it's like typically when someone has a problem, they'll Google how to solve it.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I'll take a stab at this one. It's about illuminating the problems that they don't know that they have yet. You know, we don't know what we don't know. So I think that is the job of the seller, right? Is that kind of a way of breaking this down?
I think that is a great question, and I think that's absolutely right, Scott. It's this idea, and if you come back to this statement, it's create enough doubt about how I do work today. So if I already knew it was a problem, and I believed enough it was a problem, I would change how I do work today. So I think that's a great question. They're not Googling this probably, unless they're coming in as an inbound lead, right? The idea is that they're working in a certain way. They're doing what they think is best. And our job is to create doubt that they are doing it the best way, and when in fact, there's a new way. This is something that Josh Braun does a fantastic job on. It's this idea of like jobs done or work done, knowing the type of work that our prospect does and speaking to that and illuminating a new way. I think it's a really powerful idea.
Yeah, Josh does this really well. And then also Keenan with his gap selling concept too,
Yes.
of focusing on their current state and kind of the issues in the current state before ever trying to paint a future state. And they can't get to the future state because they don't know what it looks like without you painting it.
You gotta find the gap. That's where you fit.
Yeah, totally. Let's one more thing. Let's do, before we move on, let's do a quick another poll. This is going to be really interesting. How many personas do you sell into?
Mm-hmm.
If you're an IC, how many do you sell into? If it's leadership, how much does your team sell into? This is always fascinating to find out. TJ, without looking at the results here, I saw that eye movement there.
Yeah,
what are you guessing? What are you guessing?
I bet it's an average of 4 or 5. That's my guess.
Yeah. All right, we'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
There you go. You nailed it.
That was
nailed it. 41%, 4 to 6, 40%, 2 to 3, 17% have 7+.
Yeah.
That's that would be difficult. This doesn't get talked about very often. What is a healthy amount of personas that a seller can sell into? I imagine you cap out around 6 at least, like tops, to know intimately well. Like, you need to arguably know their world better than they know their own world. And can we ask people to do that for more than 6 personas? I don't know. That seems crazy to me.
I 100% agree. And I think your answer, again, because like we have to find our own contextual relevance, we got to find our answer on the spectrum of reward. And your number of personas pushes against your spot on this spectrum. If you've got 7 personas to sell against, how on earth are you going to do highly custom prospecting for that many personas? It's just, unless you're selling, $1 million deals, it's just probably not enough time in the day. I think it's huge.
Right, because you'd have to, however long it takes you to do one fully personalized, email, let's say, 10 minutes or something, and then you have to at least get like 5 out per persona, like an hour. Like, it just starts not making sense after a while. That's really interesting.
You start getting those diminishing returns and finding that balance. Like, listen, there is 100% a case to be made for making personal connections, spending the time, and we'll get into it, but it's about balance.
Do you ever see, TJ, I'm just thinking this through because I haven't spent any time thinking about this before, and it's odd. Do you see companies ever breaking their sellers? I know like super large companies will do this, but like breaking their sellers into, instead of like you sell SMB, you sell mid-market, you sell enterprise, you focus on this persona only, know them intimately, understand the world, and break it into, basically specialize on personas. Do you see that at all?
Not enough. I see really technical companies will do this really well because they're selling to such technical buyers. Instead of making it about company size, they'll make it about like, we're selling to database managers at Fortune 100 banks versus, stock traders of ag companies, whatever. So it really depends on the offering.
Yeah. Matt Millen jumped in and says by vertical, yes. And that's a great call out and great point. That's essentially, it's similar, but it's not totally the same. By vertical and by persona would be slightly different because you could sell into multiple personas in that same vertical.
Absolutely. And it's easier inside the same vertical to jump between personas, but there are differences.
Right. Yeah, totally. Anyway, I digress. Interesting point though, maybe for another day to wrestle with it, but let's keep it rolling.
So one of the things I want to call out is like, when we talk about personalization, a lot of people jump automatically to like manual email writing, which is true and is a lot of the work that gets done. But personalization shows up in far more places and ways that I don't think gets enough attention. So personal variables that are tags, prompts, fill-ins, names, company names, these get overused and they're not nearly as effective as they once were, but they still are elements of adding some personal context to communication. Custom email messaging, of course, but specific voicemails. Not doing mass mail drops, but giving them a custom, thoughtful voicemail after you're calling. Direct social engagement. So, on social media, we're, liking, commenting, engaging. We're not pitching. We're doing the social selling thing and engaging specifically. Research gifts. We're not going to send them all like the same book that we wrote about our company, but I'm going to send them something thoughtful that they might like. Individual videos. Again, not the like, hold up my mug that has like your name on it. Like, those are fine, but they don't work as well as they used to. It's because people know, they can see through it. So these are all, and there's many more, but these are examples. Like when we say personalization, it's actually a big bucket. We need to be thoughtful of the whole cloud of concepts.
Yeah, definitely. Voice notes are another one too. Good way to personalize. I've seen those work pretty effective as well. Just an aside there.
It's a great one. And like the LinkedIn voicemail, I've seen some folks use those really well. It's a great way to get in front of people. But the big idea, the best sales campaigns maximize the spectrum of reward on manual activity. Doing manual work just to do manual work might make you feel good, but it doesn't guarantee you increased results. You got to find that sweet spot. So how do you maximize your spectrum of reward? I mean, this is why we're all here, right? This big idea. And to me, it comes back to relevance. It's all about finding and sharing and exhibiting relevance to your audience. And I think the best folks in the space are obsessed with relevance. To me, personalization can be summed up probably too simply, but it's one part customization and it's one part relevance. Relevance is the piece that you can do at a greater scale than one-to-one, and customization is whatever's going to happen one-to-one. And you need a combination, and your combination is where you're on that spectrum of reward. And to me, I think enough people do not sit and spend time with relevance. So I'm thinking that how we break this idea down of customization and relevance often comes back to really what people have been told. There's a lot of companies that just kind of throw the book at their team, and not for any malintent, but they're like, hey, we think we know the answer here, so like go do 90% manual and 10% audience-based, and then vice versa. Folks that are saying, maybe leave an auto voicemail, like don't do any customization. I'm curious, what our audience often does from this perspective.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll do one more poll on do primarily high touch or primarily low touch?
Yeah, let's see it.
And can you define one more time high touch versus low touch?
Yeah, so high touch is highly manual, customized interactions. And like I said, it's not just manual emails. It's, personal phone calls where if we don't get a connection, we're leaving a personal email. It can include research gifts, social engagement. Now, there are ways to do all those things in an impersonal way. So only the folks that are doing personal.
Yeah, this is going to be super interesting. As we wait for more to roll in, quick question we'll take from the audience. Maxine, would you focus on influencers or decision makers when you're doing your prospecting?
I think that's a yes and answer. So I think you likely, depending on kind of what your team's game plans are, you got to do both. But I think this comes back to personas, how you engage an influencer versus decision maker is likely different. If your decision maker is a CTO at a Fortune 100 company, you're probably not going to book a sales meeting with them, very likely, until later in the sales cycle. So you've got to depend on getting enough momentum and interest from that influencer. Now, vice versa, if you're selling, SMB mid-market, then maybe you do want that meeting. And the conversation with the influencer is more about like inside conversation, like, hey, how can we together sell this to your executive teams? So I think it depends on your persona and on what you're selling.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, it's about being relevant to both the personas in different ways. All right, we'll close the poll. 3, 2, 1. This is gonna be interesting. All right, so we have the winner is 80% high touch, 20% low touch. But we're really all over the map. It's not, no one's running away with it. We got 50-50 is the next one up with 23%. A lot of people, 19% doing that 80% low, 20% high touch. We got 8% doing 90% low touch. 3% have no idea. That's interesting. Is this what you typically see right now out there? And we may be skewed because we probably have a bit more of a tech-focused audience. Mostly, that's what we find.
So I would say for this tech-focused audience, this rings really true to what I see in the space. And I think the more, the more, how you say it, just the older school companies, that's going to move down the scale on more low touch than high touch. So just, the tech-focused world tends to be a little bit ahead on some of these trends. This rings true. But I love seeing, because this is the truth, that it's a big spread. It's not everyone in the world's doing one thing because the use cases demand difference.
Yeah. I got to ask, what would you suggest? And I know that the answer is it's all relative depending.
Yeah.
If you had to, gun to your head, which one are you advising a company that you knew nothing about to go with?
If I knew nothing about it, I would start at 50-50.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're a young company, you've never sold before, I think starting at 50-50 and then going up or down based on what happens is the right reflex. Most of the time people start at one end or the other. They either start at like 100%, automated low touch and move up, or vice versa. I think starting in the middle is the right play.
Yeah. I would agree for sure. And would you do that? Are you tiering out the companies then? Is that how you would kind of do it? Is you would have like this tier 1, the big companies that you really want to break into. That's the 50% that you're going with the super kind of personalized approach, and then the smaller tiered, you'd go more automated and higher touch.
Yeah, classic account-based model, right? Like we're going to name our accounts. This is our priority, and most of our time is going to go here. This is going to bring most of our revenue. But we're not going to not pay attention to this low priority. I do think though, like when companies do that, they often create 2 buckets. I'm a big fan of the 3-bucket system. So I think you need to have a group in the middle that you're spending, more than a little, but not a ton of time on, with a couple extra manual touches. Yeah.
I like it. I'm going to sneak another question in because this is we're getting some great questions. Wayne, he goes, many marketing teams put together personas that make sense, but aren't really based on insights from real persona investigation. How can sales teams get real personas that make a difference? And I think we all can resonate with this. Growing up young in my sales career, marketing team gets together in a boardroom, doesn't invite too many of the sellers, come out, say, here are the personas, and they don't seem to be completely based in reality. What would your suggestion to Wayne be?
The good news is you've got the advantage over the marketing team. If the marketing team wants to know what a persona is, they got to go do like field research. They got to pay some focus groups. They got to go walk around Walmart somewhere. Like they're in the field taking notes. You live in the field. Like as a seller, every day you're doing persona research. Every prospect that says no, thank you. Every prospect that says, yeah, I'll talk a little bit more. Every prospect that says, actually this isn't my job, is a tiny little field note of persona research. And if you do a good job paying attention, as the best SDRs do, and even AEs, you'll start to build almost like a true to life persona map that is a Venn diagram with, whatever the rest of the company is dictating. And so like the good news is you're the best placed person in the entire company to figure out what those personas really are.
Yeah, totally. Great answer. And we've got some comments here, TJ.
Give them to me.
Have you ever been told that you sound like Gary Vee before? Has this come up in your life?
Not. That is a first.
That's a pretty cool. That's a pretty cool comment. We got Danielle saying, "I literally keep looking over, thinking Gary Vee is on this webinar."
My gosh, that is the best compliment I have.
That doesn't make your week, dude. I don't know what will.
Makes my year. 2020, you're Gary Vee. Thank you.
I love it. All right, Gary, what we got next?
All right, so we got to maximize our relevance in order to reduce our dependency on customization. So this touches on one of the things that you and I were riffing on a little bit before we got on. And it's kind of this idea of like, for folks that live in the 80-20 range or 90-10 range, they have to inherently do a lot of research. And what can often happen, I'm an SVP, so I get prospected a lot. I get a lot of messages, which is great for like market research, right? And I get a lot of these like thoughtful messages like, TJ, saw you've been in the journey at Sapper, congrats. Like Inc. 500, I saw you like lemon soda, throw that in my LinkedIn, I always know who's researching. And then they very abruptly transition into like, would love to connect sometime. As a note, we sell HR solutions to companies that are looking for forward-facing individuals and could use access to better healthcare plans. Like it moves so abruptly. And so what happens is the customization doesn't work with the persona-based relevance messaging. And so the big idea that I want to bring here is that because the pendulum's always swinging, I think people are not spending enough time on relevance, which means that the meat and the potatoes of their messaging, of their voicemail scripts, of their social engagement that is templatized doesn't work. It's outdated, and it leaves their customization kind of naked on a tree. And so if we want greater results, we want better work, we need to make sure that the bones, the skeleton that our customization sits on top of is solid and it's relevant. And to me, relevance is the most important word when it comes to understanding our prospects and doing great prospecting.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like that's a perfect example of the things that get oversaturated then don't work, right? Like,
yeah.
I remember I was at, BDR 5 years ago and everyone told me to customize. So I'm like, oh, awesome. I'll go and like research the high school they went to, or the university they went to. And that actually did work for a time period. Then everyone did it. And now it no longer works at all. But there's a lot of people still operating in that framework. Yep. When they hear customized, they think that's what people mean. And I love your point on persona-based relevance. Let's break it down, man. What's it all about?
Absolutely. As a note, I just got to say that like there's a substantial amount of first-year Sapper growth that came from alumni campaigns. It worked for a time, man. Right. I have booked a lot.
Just like video, yeah. Like there's things you adopt quickly, they work, but then you gotta move on. That's why testing and iterating is so important.
It's not enough. All right, so let's talk about the what. Let's talk about the how here. So, I mean, the highest level idea is you got to know who you sell to, and you got to act on what you know. So really specifically, so share a clear and concise description of what you solve, not how you solve. And we're going to dig into this. Give useful value at every step and not just case studies. And speak in the tone and the channels that your buyer prefers, not your preferences. There's a lot of other things that can go into persona-based messaging and this idea of how do we stay relevant, how do we build good structure for customization to live on top of. These are the things that I think people are missing the most. Let's dive in. So share a clear and concise description of what you solve and not how you solve. You mentioned Keenan earlier, and to me, this is like gap selling. It's this idea of we're going to talk about the pain that our buyer feels. And if, again, sales campaigns are all about this idea of creating enough doubt in the way I do work today that I'm willing to learn more about a new way. And so to do that, to introduce that gap, like we've got to know the pain. What's the pain that your buyers knows intimately? And so most of the time, people prospecting, they're barely talking about pain, if at all. And if they do talk about pain, it's surface level pain. Like, isn't it annoying when? Doesn't it stink? Like, isn't this just the worst? Like, no. This isn't paper cut. Like, we want to go straight for like mortal wounds. like childhood trauma, not really, it was a joke, that gets our buyers to like stop and go like, oh my gosh, I need help. Because they do need help and they don't know a better way. But thank God we have the moral imperative to bring our better way to them. And I think this is huge. So, but a lot of this comes back to pain. How do you convey that plainly in 3 seconds? It's not good enough to know the pain and to write a Hemingway-style essay describing. You got to be able to say it concisely because, again, people are distracted. And you got to offer the better way. Now, this is what everyone wants to do. And what people are doing is they're doing like a 90% I have a better way and a 10% pain. They need to flip it. It needs to be 90% I know your pain and 10% I have a better way. And I think that this might be one of the biggest opportunities that I see when it comes to sales messaging. And this isn't just about email too. Remember, like personalization comes in voicemail scripts. It comes in social engagement. Anytime we're speaking a message to our prospects, if we talk about the pain, if you know my pain, you know me. I mentioned at the start of this that I was a small kid from a small town. There's things about me that are baked into that idea. And if somebody were to send me a message after this and goes, TJ, dude, growing up in a small town sucks. Like your idea of a good time is hanging out at Walmart. And if you ever have to go back and visit family for Thanksgiving, there's nothing else to do. And if you need something that your house ran out of, you have to buy it from a gas station. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can see. Like that's the work of great prospecting. It's knowing my pain in a way that makes me go like, I know you. I think it's powerful. And I think that's what a lot of people are lacking.
Great points, man. Couldn't agree more.
All right, let's keep going. Give useful value at every step and not just case studies. So, the first question is just how often are you giving value? This is where a lot of people are tripping up. They give value every 7th step in their sequence or their cadence. It needs to be way more often. If at all possible, every step should have value of some kind. But maybe even more importantly is the value has to actually be useful. So yes, there is use in case studies. There is use in white papers. You're helping build the business case for your product. But most of the time that comes later. That comes once they've engaged and they're saying, hey, TJ, can you help me make the case internally? And I think that more useful value comes back to, interest. It comes back to curiosity. What are our articles? What are bits of information? What are insights that I can provide my customer that are actually useful? A lot of the prospecting that we do talks about this idea of like helping teams build better sales campaigns. And so we produce a lot of guides and a lot of how-to materials so that folks can take those and they can go start getting to work. And if they hit a roadblock and they need to come back to us, we're here. But like they can use the things that we're sharing. It's not just like, here's another billboard. I think it's huge. And the test for this for me is like, does it pass the forward test? So if I'm sending something that I perceive to be a value touch and they forward it to another person at the company that has a similar job, are they going to read it and are they going to forward it to someone else? If your content isn't useful and it's not real value, they're not going to read it and they're certainly not going to forward it to someone else. So you need to share something that has legs of its own. You don't need it to go viral, but you need it to be shareable. It needs to have feet.
Yeah, for sure. I love this concept. And a simple way I talk about this a lot is, adding value is often just teaching your prospect how to solve the pain that your organization solves for, how they can do it themselves. You give them 1 to 20 steps. Here's how you can do it. You don't need us. Here's how you can do it. And then, like you said, at some point when they go through that journey, they're like, oh, this is a lot of work. And you're like, oh yeah, that's why we exist, because we make this easier, saves you time, saves you money, makes you more efficient. And then, that's a simple way to understand value. Because I get this, people misconstrue this idea all the time, and they'll send me something that they perceive as valuable that is not valuable to me.
That's exactly.
And I think we do that too often as sellers.
And it again comes back to knowing your persona. If you know your persona well enough, you will know what they care about. You'll hear back from them and respond to that. I think another misstep here is a lot of times people don't share anything other than their own collateral. Like it is a big world full of people writing about wild things, like go out into the world and share things that aren't just about you. Like there's nothing more reinforcing than somebody else making your argument or talking about something in your related field.
Totally, man.
So last, and maybe most importantly, or the hardest to do, is speak in the tone and channels that your buyer prefers and not your preferences. So like on a simple level, this comes back to this idea, I mentioned Josh does this really well, this idea of like jobs done, work done. Where do the people that I'm reaching out to do their work? Like physically, are they in an office? Are they commuting? Are they like, do they work with a team? Do they work by themselves? Like each one of these pieces of information tells you something. Like, when should I call TJ? Do I know anything about his life? Well, he's got a kid. You may or may not know that. He works from home. Like, okay, he's probably got a little more time. Lunch probably isn't a good time because he's at home with his kid, helping like the family eat lunch. Like, you're not going to know intimate facts like that from every person. But the idea is you should be defaulting to your prospect's life and not your own. Just because you get into the office at 8 o'clock doesn't mean that's when you should cold call them, because it's may or may not default to my preferences. Do you know what their disposition is? So we use disc profile a lot. We both have it built into our Reggie tool, and it's something that we use in our frameworks for our professional services when we're building sales cadences and sequences for teams across the globe. Coming back to knowing like the communication styles of our buyers. So DISC is a framework where it breaks everyone down into 4 buckets. It's very simple. And the idea is everyone is a D, I, S, or C, and they have different communication preferences based on who they are. Like anything, it can be broken down at the edges, but it's a useful framework because we can actually associate DISC profiles to different roles. So we can say that our personas very likely are a D or are an SC. And this helps shape our writing to make sure we're defaulting to them. As salespeople, we're often D's and I's, which means we're going to move fast. We're going to connect on a personal level. A lot of other, like an IT decision maker, often is not. They might be an SC or a CD. For those people, they want data, they want facts, and they don't want this influency VS. So by defaulting to our buyers and not ourselves, we're going to get a lot farther. And then how do you know your buyer's preferences? It's like do the work, do the persona work. Track when people are answering your calls. Track when people are engaging with you. Experiment. I talk about this concept a lot of like A/B testing and AZ testing. A/B testing is when we're doing small granular tests of templates and call scripts. And AZ testing is when we introduce something totally new to the equation. So if you've never done cold calling before, start it today and start tracking how well it works. If you've never done LinkedIn engagement, start it today. If you've never tried video or gifting, those are all things you should experiment with to figure out what your buyer's preferences are.
I love it, man. I think that's a helpful, very actionable takeaway to go and look at your personas or your ICP or whatever you want to call it, and interview some of them and find out what the majority of their DISC profile is. And that's very helpful for all your scripts, your emails, everything. It's cool that Reggie has that baked in.
It's huge. Yeah, we're really excited about it.
Cool.
Just like a quick takeaways here, like speak to the pain of your audience, share material that isn't just self-promoting, and sync with your buyer's communication style. It's sort of a shameless plug, but like this is why we built a tool to help people do it. You can do it by yourself, but we built a tool to say, based on our persona, what's the communication preferences? How should we talk to them in a way that they want to be talked to, not just how I want to talk, which I think is a huge need. And it's why we think the world needs better sales campaigns, better sequences and cadences, which is what we made Reggie to do.
We certainly do. I couldn't agree more. Now more than ever, the timing is kind of crazy with Reggie and what's going on in the world. I think it's needed so much. So if you're in sales, definitely check out Reggie.io. Such a cool tool, and I think it's gonna change the game, man. It's gonna completely change the game. So do check it out. All right, we have 4 minutes left, and I know we said we might bring people up, but sometimes that takes like a little while. We might only be able to get one question in. So I think let's just do rapid fire questions. We can probably get through all of them. Let's do it. There was a really good one. Okay. Can you give an example of a smooth transition
Mm-hmm.
from personalization
Mm-hmm.
to relevance?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? So you go from, hey, you went to X school. How do I make that relevant?
Yeah, I find that like a lot of people use that first line as the way to kick things off. If you do that, you need to make sure you have a wonderful transition sentence to help. So maybe you're starting off with, hey, TJ, I did some research and I noticed blah, 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 blah. We've been following you for some time. And this is a really common fact, impression, use case. Like you've got to come back to your persona before you go into whatever your thing is. So you've got to make sure that you quickly flip my information to us information. It's kind of hard for me to break it down in the abstract, but I would say, making sure that the things that are custom are relevant will really help. If you're just talking about like alumni and the dog's name and things that are out there, it's going to be harder to bring it in. If you're talking about the fact that like, TJ, I know that you are a fast growing company, the fact that you're in charge of like helping grow new business units. We actually have a service for helping teams solve this problem. Really specifically, here's the pain. So the less relevant the customization, the harder it will be to tie back in.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And if you can't find those, relevant, if you can't make those connections, maybe your new SDR, BDR, that's a great exercise to work with your sales leaders or your marketing leaders on, and be like, hey, watch out for some of these points. It's easy to tie to our product, service, or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. Lindsay Bunny. Lindsay, thank you for joining us today. I would like to hear TJ's tips, also known as Gary V, on how and what to message to use to regenerate a lead when the prospect goes cold.
Yeah.
So maybe you say you craft this beautiful personalized campaign, you shoot it out, they actually respond. They're like, oh yeah, this looks cool. Like, yeah, like, and then boom, dark. Worst thing in the world. How and what do you do to get them on the hook again?
I mean, it sucks. It's the worst, but it's also the best. Because I would think about it this way: that prospect has been marinating the whole time they've been away. So maybe it's not in the front of their mind, but your pitch, your conversation is in the back of their head. So, what I like to do is create a reason to re-engage. Now, if we got to talk about the problem that we solve, I make it about how we are now even better placed to solve that problem. So maybe if it's about Reggie, I'm like, hey, just so you know, we've had X update, and now we can solve this problem on top of the problem that we talked about. Like, you're still working on solving this problem, X, Y, Z. If you haven't gotten that far in the conversation, I think coming back to whatever they engaged with. Hey, TJ, when we were talking last, you were trying to figure out a better way, to get people to enroll online. So, have you fixed that? Have you solved it? I think coming back with a question, coming back to the thing that they're committed to solving because of their job, persona-based, is a great way to get re-engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I used to do all the time, is take it back to the problem and then do a helpful article that is related to that problem, that's not your own. So not some blog post that your marketing team has done. I would literally be like, hey, I thought about you when I read this article highlighting this that talks about exactly what we talked about, last week. And then not even a call to action or anything. And usually that's a good way to get them back on the hook. Matt Millen dropping some value bombs on us. Ghosting can be a lack of perceived relevance or value. 100% agree. So you got to bring that value back up or make yourself even more relevant. And I think I'm gonna leave on this Matt Millen. You don't need to know me to prospect to me, but you do need to know what problems I am solving.
Come on.
Which is relevance.
That's right.
I think it's an amazing way to wrap it up. TJ, thank you so much. You have a ton of knowledge. Always fun catching up.
Great.
I can't wait so we can actually get together and like have a cold beer or something. But hopefully that comes soon. And for all of them, for everyone who joined us, thank you so much. The questions, as always, were amazing. Thanks for being so engaged. We appreciate you all. And yeah, hopefully we have Gary V back soon.
Come on. You know I'm ready.
Got it. I don't know if we can afford his fee next time, but
Probably
we'll
can't.
see. See you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, everyone. Thanks, guys.